Tammy Daybell's sister took the stand and gave heartbreaking testimony that painted more of a truthful picture as to what was really going on with her sister. And we're going to talk about the highlights of that and those 911 calls in this video. Hello everybody and welcome back to the sofa, which is right behind me, and Mr. Roscoe is underneath it. And my name is Paul. Today we're going to be talking about a few things in this video. We're going to be talking about the testimony of Tammy Daybell's sister. We're also going to be reviewing the 911 phone calls that were made in regard to the day that allegedly, Alex Cox was shooting at Tammy. And then we're also going to review the 911 phone call made by Chad when he discovered Tammy's body the morning that she died, the morning after she died. So that's what we're going to do, and the way we'll do it is we'll put clips up here of this. Now, very quick, 60-second overview if you have not followed this case. Currently, right now, Lori Daybell is in trial. She faces a plethora of charges. Now, Tammy Daybell was Chad Daybell's wife, and out of the blue, all of a sudden, she dies, and Chad makes it out like, oh, she hadn't been doing well, and this and that. Well, then conveniently, 2 weeks later, him and Lori are married. Now, one thing that I found interesting that we're going to review is when her sister got up here, we saw it from an insider perspective of how this all played out. And his sister speaks to what a lot of us felt like, wait a second, she was seemingly healthy, right? But to hear it from somebody who knew her sister is even more impactful for me. And then for all of a sudden for her to die, and they couldn't figure out how this happened and the whole 9 yards, and he buried her so fast, but then they exhumed her body and the truth starts to speak. So let's go ahead and put up the first clip. We'll use the clips as talking points.
How did you find out about your sister's passing?
Chad called me the morning that she passed away.
Do you recall what he told you?
He told me that she had been really sick and that she'd been coughing all night, and he had gotten up and with a coughing fit around midnight, 1 o'clock, and had gone back to sleep, and he was awakened by her that morning when she rolled out of bed dead.
Okay, let's first talk about that last statement. Rolled out of bed dead. If you haven't followed this case, then you might not know that Chad Daybell was a prolific self-published author. He is a tall tale writer, I guess you could say. This sounds like something out of one of his cheesy books. She rolled out of bed dead, right? It doesn't even make sense. Okay, it just doesn't even make sense. And so that was a huge red flag right there. Secondly, for him to call, oh, she's been sick, she's been this, she's been that. Now, we'll listen what the sister says, because this doesn't make sense to her, right? Because she's seen Tammy, she talks to Tammy. This is her sister whom she's close with. Think of anyone that you're close with in your life. You're going to know if they are so sick that they are going to pass away. It's very rare in these circumstances that something of that nature would happen, given the context of all this. So let's see what else the sister has to say.
Did that make any sense to you?
No, because I had just seen her 2 weeks previous to that, and she hadn't been she wasn't that sick at all. She was very healthy.
Now, again, I'll say this. Yes, this can happen. We hear of these situations of people, oh my gosh, they drop dead, or, healthy young people falling out on the, sports field. And yes, we get it. This happens. In this particular case, with this context, with all the evidence, I do not believe for 1 second that she was sick at all, right? I think the evidence clearly points to her life was taken from her. And the way that her sister describes Tammy, is that Tammy was this person that, yes, she was a little bit introverted, but she loved people, she loved helping people, and people liked to be around her. She loved animals, and animals liked to be around her. She sounded like a wonderful woman. And so when I hear that kind of testimony, and then I think of their final moments, she was just getting into the zone of having grandchildren, kids are married, all this kind of stuff. And then I think of her life being taken from her so soon at the hands of, personally, I think Chad. It's so devastating. It's so absolutely devastating and completely unnecessary.
Did she indicate to you any activities that she was participating in?
Yeah, she was in a clogging class, and she was showing us some of her clogging moves, but she was also preparing to run a smaller race in their town. So she was trying to stay fit and healthy.
And how old was she?
She wasn't 50 yet. We were going to get ready to celebrate her 50th birthday.
Not even 50, getting ready to celebrate that. This is a young person, right? Clogging, running, doing all this stuff. We've heard from other testimony. Only person that is out there talking about how sick she was is Chad, right? Well, we know why he was doing that. Well, and probably Lori too. Okay, we can surmise that at this point. But again, none of this other evidence adds up. And one thing that is so shocking to me, or frustrating, aggravating, however you want to say it, all those things, is that when you look at the destruction that these people caused to others' lives, and then on one hand, and then the absolute carelessness of it, because it's like they didn't even think. They were so enamored with each other, they didn't even think for 1 second, which I'm glad they didn't, because hopefully it's going to bring them to justice, right?
When she came to visit in October, was that a normal visit?
No, it was out of the blue.
Did anyone come with her?
No, she came by herself, and that was unusual because Tammy didn't like to travel alone.
Did she tell you why she came down to visit?
Chad told her that she needed to come visit her family.
Now, of course, we can surmise what was really going on. Chad is in his lustful stage and, completely enamored with Lori Daybell, Lori Vallow. And this is the other thing that I think is just so heartbreaking, is because you sit here and think the imagery of Chad and Lori and all this, nonsense they were doing. And then you sit here and look at someone like Tammy and the other victims in the case, these innocent bystanders that, for God's sakes, could have left, right? If it was like, look, I want to go over here with this person. Okay, bye. But they hide it beneath this veil of, no pun intended, we're saving the planet, we're doing this with 144. But at the end of the day, it all, in my opinion, comes back down to money as well, right? Because of course he doesn't want to get divorced, he needs the money. This is the whole thing with each of them, and that just absolutely runs all over me, because I feel like the lives that they took had so much to offer the world.
Did you notice any change in Chad and Tammy's relationship?
Yes, they stayed with us the first week in June of 2019, and something seemed off. They were very awkward at our house, and Chad wouldn't converse with my husband like they normally do. It just seemed really strange, and we weren't sure what was going on.
Were there any other instances where things seemed a little off?
Yes, in my birthday in July, Tammy showed up at my front door to give me my birthday present. I didn't even know they were in town, and he stayed in the car the whole time with it running. So she literally stood in my house for 5 minutes to talk, and then they just left it. He didn't even bother to come in and say anything. It was really weird.
Now, here's my thing with this. I think at this point, Chad had moved on, right? He had just moved on. He was enamored with Lori. That's the world he's living in. And he had just moved on. And they clearly can do this, all right? I mean, he seemed to have no problem doing this. Lori had no problem doing this. They had moved on to this new life, and everything else is just, whatever. So this is what I think was going on. And just think to whether it's happened to you, people you know, or even these cases we look at where an affair is taking place or cheating or something like that, and the spouse just becomes vacant. They have removed themselves from you, from the present, and their body might be around you, but all this in here is with the new person, right? Think of also, what's his name? Chris Watts, and the way Shanann was describing him there towards the end. This type thing. So I think that's completely what's going on here, and it had to have been so odd for the sister to be like, wait, you're just showing up unannounced, Chad won't even come into the house, And this also adds into where I'm like, what did he think was going to happen when he just mysteriously got married and all this weird behavior? That's what blows my mind about it, is how sloppy they were. It doesn't even make sense. It's like, did you not think for 1 second that people were going to put this together like that?
And you found out the morning of her death
Yes.
Was that October 19th of 2019?
Yes, it was.
When was her funeral?
It was the following Tuesday. It was really quick.
And did that seem odd to you, how quick the funeral was?
Yes, it did.
Did you have any discussions with Chad about that?
Yes, I asked him on a phone call of why we were, doing things so quickly, and he told me that he thought that's what Tammy would have wanted, was to not have all the fuss. I also asked him why he was burying her in Springville instead of Rexburg, because their kids are in Rexburg. He is in Rexburg. I mean, it's his spouse. I'm a sister. We're close. I like having her down there with me, but I'm not her, her husband or their mom. And he said that he thought that it would be better if she was down there because it was cold in Rexburg and under ice and snow all year, and they wouldn't get to visit her as much.
I mean, so many things going on with this clip, right? First of all, burying her, away from there. I'm like, are you kidding me? Now, I am sure that he used his former, cemetery sexton expertise to be like, well, the ground is underneath this permafrost for most of the year. We're not going to be able to visit properly. But also, isn't it so convenient for him, right? Now, that part there, I'm sure that's a major red flags for the sister. Also, this whole thing of Chad said that that's what she would have wanted. She wouldn't have wanted all this fuss. Are you kidding me? I think she did because she wasn't supposed to be there, right? And again, that's why he wanted it done this way. We can clearly see now why this went down this way. But again, him offering up these excuses and whatnot, it was almost like they just picked an excuse out of a hat. Okay, she dies out of the blue. This is a shock to everybody. We're burying her out of town, immediately burying her. And it's like, well, okay, and then the big whammy coming up is then he's married, in 2 weeks, right? I mean, it blows my mind.
At some point, did you learn that Chad had been remarried?
Yes, we learned it was actually 1 month to the day of her burial is when I found out about it.
Now, 1 month is bad enough, right? Just think about that. Now, we're going to hear in a minute how it was actually even sooner than that. Imagine this goes down and your brother-in-law is married to somebody new in a month. You would be sitting here thinking, immediately for me, the timeline. You had to have been seeing them before Tammy died, right? How there's not even enough time, for a month. I mean, there's so many red flags. And this to me just goes to show their entitlement. And I'm speaking of Chad and Lori, we're moved on. Who cares? We're in our own little world.
Did you later learn when he had actually gotten married?
Yeah, because I told my husband to find out because Chad was still speaking, he was talking to my husband at that point, and I said, you find out when he actually got married, because I feel like that's very quick, even for somebody who's grieving. And you don't get married 4 weeks after you just buried your wife of almost 30 years. You just don't do that. And we found out it had only been 2 weeks after she had been buried, and we were devastated.
Devastated is the proper word. Can you imagine? That would have felt like a punch to the stomach. And that would have sent off, even just hearing her talk about it gives me chills because you just know, right? You just know this is not good. And this is what I was talking about, listening to someone who's on the inside of this. We've heard these perspectives from multiple people, other family members, right? But it always, nonetheless, it just hits me so hard to hear it from someone from the inside you're hearing how it all came to fruition with them of, this is not good, right? This would have been red flag central. 1 month would have been red flag central. This right here would have been borderline. I'm immediately on the phone with the police. You know what I'm saying? Immediately on the phone with the police. This is not right.
At some point, did Chad indicate or did you learn the name of his new wife?
Yeah, he told us her name was Lori Ryan, and that her previous husband had a heart attack. And so she had been grieving a spouse as well, and that's why they connected, was that they were both grieving the passing of spouses.
So they did this over a 2-week period and got married. I mean, seriously, this is what I'm talking about. They just didn't care. They were doing their own little thing. They did not care. But also, when this goes to show, when you sit here and look into the dynamic of the covering up, the attempts to cover up, yet the sloppiness of it. Her name's Lori Ryan and her spouse died of a heart attack. Now, we'll get some more excuses from Chad via the sister here in a moment. But regardless, that right there, I would have been like, what? I mean, you already know that they had the heebie-jeebies because decent people know these are decent people, right? Her sister. Decent people's red flags go off over this behavior, okay? This is why this just seemed to be so normal to Chad and Lori because, you know, they're not decent people. You know what I'm saying? They're doing horrendous things in the name of, you know, their religion or whatever.
I discovered her name was tied to Valo, and it brought up newspaper articles about a man in Arizona who had been shot in his own home by a brother-in-law. And I took that to my husband and I said, I think this is the same woman that he's married. He did not die from a heart attack.
Now that right there would have scared me to death, right? That would have scared me to death because again, look at how they uncover this stuff. Look at how behind the scenes you have all this coming together. Larry and Kay over here, Charles over here, sister Samantha over here. Of course, all these stories would connect eventually, and we're seeing that now. But in the beginning, this, you know, it was very isolated. This person didn't know this, and they start piecing these puzzle pieces together, and it just adds up to the heartbreaking events that took place.
After learning that information, did you ask Chad about whether or not Lori had children?
Yes, I did. I asked him in a phone call. I said, so please tell me about this woman that you've married to replace my sister with. And he told me that she had had a hard life and that the reason why they hadn't told me her name was because she was trying to, you know, stay away from the stigma of what had happened to her. And I said, well, so please help me understand. So now that you've married her, are there children? Because I had seen the other information, and I said, are you going to be raising kids together? You know, Mark will be coming home from his mission. And he told me no, that there's no children and that they were going to be empty nesters.
Powerful, powerful testimony. No children were going to be empty nesters. Cannot roll my eyes hard enough at it. I mean, and this is the pre-planning that I'm talking about, right? They knew exactly what they were doing. They had this planned out to a T. They just had to convince everybody else, you know what I'm saying? And themselves a little bit. I think Lori, you know, had to be like, oh, well, we're going to do it for this reason. But she knew what was going on, right? Now, also in this, imagine having this conversation again with your brother-in-law and being like, okay, so what's up with, you know, this is who this really is. You've lied about this. Oh, well, she just doesn't want that stigma. Are you kidding me? I mean, again, what do you say? I would have been flabbergasted. Now let's switch directions a little bit and let's listen to the 911 phone call, some clips of it. This was the night that Tammy Daybell was shot at. And again, we can surmise that this was Alex at this point doing this, but let's listen to her describing what was going on to the 911 caller.
October 9, 2019. 21 hours, 49 minutes, 20 seconds.
Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Hi, I need to report something. Okay, go ahead. What's the address? Okay, at 202 North, 1900 East. The corner with the blinking yellow light on Salem Highway.
Is it a suspicious person?
Yes.
Okay, what was he wearing?
He was all dressed in black and he had a ski mask on.
And he said the blinking light now is where you saw him?
No, he's gone now because I pulled up into our driveway and he I was getting stuff out of the backseat of my car, and suddenly he was there, and he had a paintball gun, and he was shooting, and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing. And then he just kept doing it, so I yelled for my husband, and then he took off running around the back of my house.
Okay, give me just 1 minute. Stay on the line with me.
Now, what's bone-chilling about this phone call is, number one, we know what was really going on. She's lucky she lived through this, right? Number two, I yelled for my husband. Well, he was orchestrating this, unfortunately. Of course, she has no idea. You know, he was probably more upset that it didn't happen, right? And then I just think of Alex and thinking that he's just, you know, he's their little puppy dog. He's doing the Lord's work, which requires killing everyone around him, right? I mean, that part just runs all over me. But, you know, listening to this, you just want to go back and, I mean, just stop it, right? Because for me, this is one of the first things of like hearing Tammy talk and interact and that type thing, you know, to put a voice with the face and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, the previous on this phone call was her son-in-law who had called him first. And this part is she's calling to make sure it was reported. You know, the son-in-law who lives across the street from him. And, you know, you listen to it and you just think, my God, they had no idea what was coming down the pipeline. The absolute evil that lived with them, number one, Chad. Number two, that he brought into their home, you know, and under his direction, because this would not have been happening without him giving a green light and orchestrating it. I do not think for 1 second that Alex would have cooked up any of this or had the wherewithal to pull off any of this on his own. Clearly he didn't, because he didn't take her out in this time. And there's evidence of, you know, Lori made the text messages or whatever saying he could never do anything right in reference to this. So, you know, missing the shot or whatever. Same thing happened with Brandon Boudreaux. Pardon me. And again, thank God he's alive, right? And that's the whole thing, you know. Side note, I'm dying to hear Melanie get on the stand, not Melanie Gibb, the other Melanie, and talk about that, because it all just coincides with all this stuff. If their partners all get killed off, and Chad and Lori financially benefit, and they all run off together to, you know, save the world or whatever. So let's continue listening to the 911 phone call.
Do you know what direction he was going?
He went behind my house, and it's so dark out here, and I just went in the house and got my husband and son, and then they went out and looked, and he was long gone by then. So he was on the north side of my house, is where he went to get away.
Okay.
All I keep thinking is like Chad ducking out and then texting Alex moments later after pretending to look for him. You know, he knew exactly who it was. The son had no idea, right? They're probably like, what? And of course, you know, it was a paintball gun. You're not going to think, when you're not involved, like when you are literally an innocent bystander and something like this happens, you're not going to be thinking somebody's approaching you with a rifle or whatever, a gun to kill you. It's like your brain's just not going to go there. You know what I mean? And so that's the tragic part of this, again, is you just see it coming down the tracks and colliding, you know, and you want to go back and stop it, but obviously, sadly, it's too late for that.
He didn't say anything, or he just kept acting like he was holding the gun like he was, you know, had a rifle and just shooting at me, so. But nothing came out of the gun either, so I don't think it was loaded.
I mean, and thank God it bought her some time, but not enough, right? Now, my next question would be this. So imagine this happens, right? Imagine they pulled this off and she was shot or whatever in front of the house. Would Chad have still gotten married 2 weeks later? You know, and what kind of red flags would that send off, right? I think maybe he just like reeled it back in and was like, wait a minute, we're going to go with whatever it was they were doing. Now, it does look like he probably suffocated her, Tammy, in some way. So he was just lucky that he was able to slip through the cracks in the moment and not, you know, have the autopsy, and none of this really added up in the moment type thing to get away with it for a little bit longer. You know, but that would be my next question is, okay, if they were successful in taking her life in front of the house with a gun, would you still have gone out and got married? Because that would have been so red flag. You know, I mean, completely. I mean, we see this stuff in true crime stories all the time, and it just baffles me that people still are willing to do it.
911, where's your emergency?
We're at 202 North, 1900 East. What's going on?
911, where's your emergency? We're at 202 North, 1900 East. 911, where's your emergency? What's going on? 202 North, 1900 East. 911, where's your emergency? 202 North, 1900 East.
We just found my mom. She's on the ground frozen, or she's stiff, and I don't know.
Are you in Madison County or Fremont County?
I'm Chad, the husband. She's clearly dead.
So sorry. Okay. Okay. Are you in Rexford, or because your address shows Rexford address, but you're in Fremont County?
Mile past.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Okay, can I get your name?
Chad, Dave, though? Oh, man.
Okay, Chad, I'm going to get somebody up to you right now, okay?
Yeah, the corner where the blinking yellow light is, the red house.
Yes, sir. Red house on the corner.
Yes.
Blinking yellow light. Okay. We'll get somebody out to you, okay? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
If you need anything else, you call me back, okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
I mean, my God. First of all, the whole thing, she's clearly dead. I mean, what an odd thing to say, you know. And then those fake crocodile whimpers. My thing is, I'm listening to this thinking he's probably excited and relieved. You know what I mean? He's like, finally. You know, because clearly this just opened the floodgates for him to start his new life with Lori. You know, and I would just love to know really the conversations that went on privately in that home between him and his kids as to who Lori was. You know, and all that. Because the questions, and not even just with the kids, but anyone close. Just like we saw Samantha up here, who's like, he got married 2 weeks later. You know, like, what? This is completely bizarre. And so, yeah, I don't buy this 911 phone call at all. Now, again, in the beginning, the people who are just being introduced to this, meaning the 911 people and all that, they don't know any different, right? I mean, this is a husband and a son calling in saying that their, wife and mother is found dead on the floor. So, they're not going to really think anything twice of it. That's the thing that's so complicated with this case, is there's so many layers to pull back, so many moving parts and pieces, and so many lies. Now, what I want to do is finish out by looking at a few tweets from Nate Eaton, and this is in regards to the cause of death with Tammy Daybell. So I'm going to put this on the screen now, read them, and then we'll talk about them. So we'll start at the bottom. The first one says, there are a number of ways people can be asphyxiated with suffocation, neck compression, anything that impairs someone's ability to breathe normally, Christensen says. When someone stops breathing, they lose consciousness, but their heart can continue to beat for a time. Moving up, Christensen says they looked at pesticides and other potential drugs. There was nothing in her system that played a role in her death. Moving up, there were bruises on Tammy's arms that happened in the hours around the type of her death. I think they meant time. Christensen says they are consistent with someone being restrained and would be consistent with asphyxia being cause of death as well. So here's the thing, and this is what I think that happened. I think he suffocated her, and I think she struggled, and I think he held her down. Now, my only other question is, again, would come into, were there 2 people there that did this? Obviously, there's other people in the house, so I'm of the frame of mind that probably it was just Chad, and she probably struggled, and he probably held her down and suffocated her, let her sit there, and then rolled her out of bed himself. Type thing. Probably made up the coughing sounds and all that because of the struggle that was going on in case anyone else heard. That type of situation. Now, we already know from the Alex scenario that whenever he was there, he had obviously got away somehow, right? For the shooting thing is what I'm talking about. So that part to me also is like, okay, well, he knows how to hide out of the property or whatever. But again, I think that they tried to do it a couple of ways. He says she was going to get in a car wreck. It didn't happen for that dream he had. Then, the shooting didn't take place. So it was like, if you got to do it, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Is probably what Chad was thinking. And that's what he did. And then they called this 911 phone call in the morning. What blows my mind is their willingness. When I say there, I'm speaking of Lori, I'm speaking of Chad, and obviously Alex, to murder these people under the same roof as, the kids are there, guests are in the house, all these different scenarios. And you're like, they had zero chill about this, zero care, zero regard for others' lives. They were only concerned about themselves, and they were drunk with lust and greed and whatever they had going on with one another, and this idea that they were just the next, messiahs that the new Bible was going to be written about. And they just found, I think, weak-minded people to do their work for them. If you look at some of the testimony we've heard, obviously we can't hear Alex's, but we can see his actions and hear testimony of them. Then you hear, Melanie Gibb, and the things that people just went along with willingly until it was too late. So that's it. Let me know what your comments are, your thoughts are on what happened with Tammy. I'm very curious to see if you think, was it just Chad? Was there two people? Like, how do you think it went down? What do you think happened? And do we think that they're going to be able to get convictions on Tammy? Obviously, I hope so, and I think for Chad, most certainly. So anyways, that's it. If you're still watching, I do appreciate it. And until we gather around my little water bottle and me and the bottle cap, I'll see you soon.